Hello people, this is APO Dino, and today we're going to do a quick flight on Microsoft Flight Simulator. This is the first time I've ever done such a project, so even though I do have a VATSIM account, I'm not going to use it today. We're just going to do a simple flight here. We're at New York's LaGuardia Airport in the brand new terminal, and we're going to be heading on over to Ronald Reagan Washington National Airport. I've already done some initial flows here, but we're going to get started here, and we're going to come over to our, first thing we're going to do is I'm going to come over to our EFB here, and we're going to take a look at our in-flight paperwork here. So you see here we're going to be American Airlines flight number 1344 from LaGuardia to Washington DC, Ronald Reagan. Our alternate's Pittsburgh, and our route of flight's going to be radar vectors to Biggie, Quebec 75, Medina, then the Clipper 2 arrival into DCA. Estimated time en route's 47 minutes, and an altitude is going to be 22,000 feet. Whoops. And then we're going to scroll down a little bit here. These are all the points along the route of flight, and then we're going to come down here, and this is the actual part of the flight plan that we're looking for here. So we're going to be ramp weight of 147,506, planned payload of 37,000 pounds. So we're going to have a release fuel of 12,725 pounds. This is going to be our en route burn down to DC, about 4,100 pounds. Gets us down to DC with an arrival fuel of about 8,100 pounds. Again, 47 minutes in the air. And then no MELs or anything like that. And then this is our dispatcher. That is a very weird name for a dispatcher. And then captain and first officer. And then we'll take a look at the weather here. The latest METAR, beautiful day here, just broken 25,000, light winds. So we'll be using runway 13 for departure. Good visibility. Altimeter's 3020. And then down in DC, very good weather there, and good weather at Pittsburgh at our alternate. So overall, beautiful day for flying. And since our release fuel is 12,725 pounds, I'm going to have them bring us up a little bit more than that. We'll go up to 13,000 just to be on the safe side. So I'll come over here, and we'll request 13,000 pounds of gas, and the fuelers will come out and take care of that for us. Now let's go to the FMS here and initialize this. So this is just our initial data here. So we're actually going to come back here and go to the ATSU. The ATSU is the ACARS unit on this airplane, this being an Airbus A320. So I'm going to come over here to our initial, and we're just going to request our initial data, and it's going to load American 1344. LaGuardia to Washington National, and the fuel on board is increasing because the fueler is fueling us, and you can see that we've got the refueling here on the ECAM. And then the next page, that would just be our ACARS times. So then we're going to come back here, and we're going to go to our weight and balance. And then I'm just going to request the weight and balance to equal our planned flight plan. So it's going to be 161 passengers, 0 payload. So we're just carrying all passengers today, no payload. And since it's going to take me a few minutes here to get the flight plan, we're going to start boarding. So we're going to take care of that real quick. And we're going to come back over here to our initial page. I'm just going to hit the init request. And it's going to upload our flight plan from LaGuardia to DC with the alternate Pittsburgh, cost index 28,000 feet, planned cruising altitude of 22,000 feet. So then we're going to come over to our operating flight plan. And then it's LaGuardia, Biggie, Medina, and then a discontinuity. So I got to plug in the arrivals and the departures manually. So I mentioned we're going to plan 1-3, and we're not using ATC today, but what I'm going to demonstrate here is if we come back here, go back to ATSU, and then come over here to ATIS, I can just plug in LaGuardia and request a departure, and we're going to send that. We'll delete that. And then now that says I got a company message here. So we'll come back down here. We'll go to receive messages. And according to the ATIS, and our GPS is aligned here. Information Sierra, wind 070 at 6, visibility 10, broken 25,000, temperature 9, dew point 03, altimeter 3020, ILS 22 approach, land 22, depart 13. So we'll come back to the flight plan here. We're going to select LaGuardia, departure, select runway 13, and then in the real world on this flight, they would probably give us the Goldman 7, so that's what I'm going to fly today, and we'll look at that in a second. And we will insert that. And then these are the points on the Goldman 7. Now we're going to come back over here to the EFP so I can show you what that is. So we'll come here, select LaGuardia. And then we're going to click on SID. Goldman 7 RNAV departure, and we're going to zoom this out a little bit so you guys can see it a little better. And what this is Kiwi max 220 at or above 25, Vobaz at 220 at or above 4,500, Goldman, then depart Goldman on a 335 heading, and then we'll expect radar vectors on course. As you can see here, it says expect radar vectors after Goldman.
Calling completed.
And they're just telling me the fueling's complete, our boarding's complete. So we're just gonna be a few more minutes up here. And then I'm actually gonna lighten this up so you can see this a little better. And it says traffic file Biggie, which we are, do not exceed 25,000 until reaching 11,000 feet. Normally in the United States, you maintain 250 until 10,000 feet, but in New York
from the flight
City,
deck,
the
on behalf of myself, your captain, the
restriction
first
is up
officer,
to
and cabin crew, I'd like to
11,000
take
feet.
this time to welcome you aboard our flight. We're just wrapping up some paperwork up front here and waiting to receive final numbers from the ground crew, then we'll be on our way. Flight attendants will be coming through the cabin shortly with a very important safety briefing. We do ask that you give them your full, undivided attention as they review the safety operations of this Airbus aircraft. We do appreciate your business having you aboard this flight. If there's anything we do to make your flight any more enjoyable, please don't hesitate to ask. Welcome aboard.
It also says we're going to maintain 5,000, so I'm going to plug 5,000 in on the initial here. And now coming back to the ATIS here, it says our altimeter is 3020, so I'm going to set this in the standby. And the primary as well. And then the other thing we got to do is we got to plug in the star and arrival into DC. I'm anticipating into DC the river visual to runway 19. That is not in the box, so I'm going to plug the RNAV to 19 in as a backup. And then we're on the Clipper 2 arrival. And I'm just going to add Fergie as the VIA, and then the Clipper 2 arrival Modena transition. So we will insert that in the box. And now the Goldman departure looks right as before. Kiwi at 220 at or above 25, then Vobaz 220 at or above 45, and then Goldman on course, and then radar vectors to Biggie, and now the Clipper 2 is plugged in. We'll look at that on the arrival, and then there's discontinuity and it's got the RNAV plugged in. We'll discuss that a little closer to DC. So just going to bring the FMS back down. And now we're going to do the rest of the initialization since boarding's complete. I'm going to come over here, and we're going to, this is automated, so we'll just plug in our max 0 fuel weight, and our block is the number of fuel. We had them load 13.0, and the rest of this is going to auto-generate. as you see. So now we're going to come to the perf page and plug in our V speeds here. LaGuardia is a 7,000 foot runway. It's a very short runway out of here, and we're fully loaded, so I'm going to plan a config 3 takeoff. And we're not going to bother with flex today. We're just going to go full power, toga as they call it on the Airbus. So we'll just plug in our V speeds automatically. So it's going to be 126, 127, 131 on the takeoff. And now all of our FMS and nav data is pretty much set and ready to go here. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and brief the takeoff out of LaGuardia the way we would do in the real world. And we do a threat forward briefing. So the threats on this departure are going to be the short runway. New York airspace in real life is very crowded, so I'm going to brief that. So we just keep a good lookout for traffic. And the fact that we're very heavy, so I got to be, if something goes wrong, I may not be able to come back here because of the shorter runway, and I'll brief that in a second. So as I've mentioned before, off of LaGuardia, this is going to be a toga takeoff, config 3. And as we've already discussed, the V speeds are going to be 126, 127, 131. And we're cleared. And we're going to pretend that our clearance is the Goldman SID, so we're going to follow the Goldman SID up to 5,000 feet. Below 80 knots, I'm going to reject the takeoff for any indication. Above 80 knots, I'm only going to reject the takeoff for an engine failure, an engine fire, or a loss of directional control, or something else that I think is catastrophic that the airplane just can't fly. Otherwise, I'm going to continue the takeoff. I'm going to get airborne and fly the airplane, clean it up, and get to a safe altitude. Then I'm going to look at the ECAM non-normal and run any appropriate memory items as needed. Aside from that, we're going to... If it is something that I have to return, that I have to land on the ground immediately, I have the options of flying straight out and getting vectored into JFK and landing on the longer runways there, or just turning left and flying a left downwind to runway 22 into LaGuardia. And aside from that, we're looking at a transition of 18,000 feet, and that's it for my briefing. This is where I'd ask the pilot not flying if they had any questions, but I'm the only pilot flying this, so we're just going to go ahead and run a before start checklist. So my recorder ground control is on, my maintenance and flight forms are on board and reviewed. Fuel quantity, as we've noted, is 12,700 is required. We've got 12,980 on board. Takeoff performance, as we've already mentioned, is 126, 127, 131 for a toga takeoff. Oxygen is checked and checked. The seatbelt sign is on. And I'm also going to run a flow here, so I'm going to start my APU and turn on my fuel pumps while I'm at it. My ECAM is checked, my parking brake is on and set, my MCDU is set, and my altimeters, I've got 3020 set twice. And the departure briefing has been reviewed, and my before start checklist is therefore complete. So I'm just waiting for the APU to fire up here, and then I can switch to external power, and then we'll get pushed back, and we'll be on our way here. As you can see, my APU is up and running, so I'm going to actually switch off the external power and switch over to APU generator power. I'm also going to turn on the APU bleed so that in an engine start, I need to switch on the crew supply of oxygen. And since we're now ready to go and the doors are closed, I'm going to turn on my beacon and my wing light.
Flight attendants, arm doors, and cross-check.
The flight attendants are doing their thing. You're going to hear them in a minute give the safety briefing in the background. With all this being said, we are ready to push back. So I'm going to go over here. I've got the toolbar pushback, and I've already programmed my pushback into the system, so we're going to request pushback.
Cockpit to ground.
This is ground. Stand by.
You can follow along with the safety information card in your seat back pocket. So you fasten your seatbelt, insert the flat metal edge into the buckle and pull on the strap to tight. The release should lift the top flap of the buckle. Please keep your seatbelt back and low and tight across your lap when the signal sign is off and have it visible to the crew at all times. Your life vest is in a pouch under your seat. If instructed by the crew, tear open the pouch, push the vest and pull it over your head. Wrap the strap around your waist, secure the buckle, and pull the strap tight.
Okay, sir. The bypass pin is installed. All doors and hatches closed and all ground equipment is removed.
The parking brakes are set. You may lift.
Parking brake set. Lifting the aircraft.
And that's a little different than it's done in the real world, but
We are cleared for start and push.
most of the flight sim community is Europe heavy, so they tend to use a lot of European equipment.
Please take a moment out of look at your crew.
So
Parking
that's
brakes are
the
released.
Commencing pushback. You can start the engines in sequence.
It will start in the sequence.
And on that note, normally the captain would be worried about the pushback, and then the first officer would be starting the engines at this point. But since I'm a solo pilot flying, I'm just going to let them push me back all the way, and then as soon as the pushback's complete, then I'm going to start my engines. That way I can focus on the engine start without having to worry about the pushback.
If you have any questions about the safety features of this aircraft, please don't hesitate to ask. Smoking includes use of electronic cigarettes is never allowed on any flight. Tampering with, disabling, or destroying smoke detectors and active expressions is a federal offense and could result in a fine.
As you can see, we were at gate 15 in LaGuardia. And yes, the scenery is the new terminal in LaGuardia. This is what it's going to be upon completion. I know in the real world there's still parts of the old D concourse that are in the process of being demolished. But this is how it's going to look in the future, boys and girls, and it looks pretty good.
Okay, pushback completed. Please set your parking brake.
Parking brake set.
Parking brake set. Lowering aircraft.
Ground. You may disconnect.
Okay, sir. Clear to disconnect. Pin has been removed. See you at the side. Have a good flight.
Holding position waiting for the visual. Thank you and goodbye.
We see the tow bar driver driving away. So I've got my APU bleeds on. So I'm just going to turn my starter to ignition start. And we're going to start the timer. I'm going to start number 2 first. So as you can see, the N2s are rising. The starter's engaged. Ignition comes on. And the fuel flow's going in, and there's light up. Now we're just waiting for the engine to finish its start. The IAE engine, the engines that are on these Neos do take a while to rev up, so we're just going to wait for that to finish up. There's the avail light, so we have a good start there. Right there. So now I'm going to start number 1. And as you can see, the N2's coming up, EGT's coming up, the starter's engaged. There's the ignition, there's light up. Now we just wait for this engine to finish spooling up. Alright, we have 2 good starts. So, I don't need my APU bleed anymore. I don't need the APU anymore. I come down here, put the auto brakes to max. We're going to set our flaps to 3. And I have buttons on the joystick for this. Transponder is going to go to TARA. My ground spoilers are armed. So I'm going to click this. I need to turn my wind shear on. And then we're going to do a quick flight control check. So we're going to come here. Full left, neutral. Full right, neutral, full forward, neutral, full back, neutral, rudder full left, neutral, full right, neutral. And I need to set my stab trim as well. Alright. That switch that gave the hit. So we are good to go. So switch my taxi light on. And we are clear on the left and clear on the right. Sleep. So we're going to actually taxi under the bridge just so I can show off some of the scenery here. I'm going to actually stop at the top of the alley here. I'm just going to stop here real quick because I'm going to need to turn the PED light on. Even though we don't do it in the real world, they still have it that way. I'm just going to do the takeoff config test since I'm a pilot of 1. Alright. Parking brakes released. You can see this scenery is so amazing. They have even have the Welcome to New York sign there next to runway 13. So we're going to taxi Bravo to Papa to runway 13. So I'm just turning left onto Bravo now. And unlike LaGuardia in the real world, there is absolutely nobody waiting for takeoff. I'm going to slow down approaching 422. We're going to do a quick scan here. We are clear on the left and the right. So before takeoff checklist, flaps plan 3 indicating 3. Takeoff data and speeds are checked. The weight is checked. It's 152.2. Stab trim 1.5 is checked, flight controls are checked, and ECAM takeoff, no blue. And then the rest of the takeoff checklist is fuel 12.8 required, 10.2 on board. Runway and FMS is checked, runway 13. Flight sensor notified, engines at norm, and TCAS is at TARA. So with that being said, we're good to go. Just gonna ding the flight attendants, turn my lights on.
Flight attendants, please prepare for takeoff.
So here we go. Knots, checks. To climb.
Visibility 10. Sky condition clear. Temperature 60 dew point.
Flaps 2.
10.
Flaps 1.
10 treated 4. Visibility 10. Sky condition clear. Temperature 62.10 C. Altimeter tree 016.
Flaps up. Right about here, ATC would normally clear us up to about 11,000 feet, so I'm going to plug 11,000 feet in. I'm just going to show you over here. There's JFK, and you got some gorgeous scenery. There's the old Floyd Bennett Field. Notice the FMS is properly maintaining 220 knots until crossing this fix. I'm going to zoom out a little bit on the nav range here. And then usually right about here, the LaGuardia controller would hand you off to another New York departure controller. And this guy is going to clear you up to 17,000 feet usually. Going to say right about here they'll give us direct Biggie, so we just go direct Biggie now. Biggie, execute. I'm going to zoom this out and maintain 250 for the next 1,000 feet because the SID said maintain 250 knots to 11,000 feet. Autopilot overshot the turn a little bit, but now that we're above 11,000 feet, I'll get this thing back into managed speed so that we can speed up to our cruising speed. And you can see out. You can kind of see out forward here, excellent view today. On the left side there's the shore of New Jersey, down here is Staten Island. You really can't get a good shot of Manhattan. Right about here is where the New York departure is going to hand us off to New York Center. And as soon as we check with New York Center, they will clear us up to flight level 220, which is our cruising altitude for this flight. And this flight's limited to 22,000 feet because there's one low altitude sector between the New York airports and the boundary of Potomac airspace. And rather than climb up into a high altitude sector and then step you right back down into the low altitude sector, it just makes it a lot easier on ATC to keep you in the low altitude sector. Up on 18,000 feet, so we go to 9s and 2s on the altimeter, and I can also switch off the lights now. Put on the other airports so you can kind of get an idea of where we're at here. We got Morristown over here. As you can see, Biggie's just west of Trenton. So we have North Philadelphia here, Allentown over here. So our route of flight is going to take us west of Philadelphia, and then eventually over Baltimore and into Washington National. Going to put this view on. This is an absolute gorgeous view. We're going to show you how that we're going to take a little better look at that later. 21 for 22. And I need to remember to kind of point my arrow a little bit. I'm instinctively pointing with my finger, and I know you can't see my finger on the feed there, so. Here we are leveling off at 22,000 feet. And I'm thinking we're going to have a smooth ride pretty much all the way down to Washington, so I'm going to let the folks up. We're already getting prompted to enter the destination data, so let's pull up the ATIS for DC and get working on that. So we'll come over here. ATIS.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, once again, from the flight deck, Captain speaking. We've just reached our cruising altitude for the flight. As we begin to settle in, I do want to remind you to please keep your seat elbows clear from the aisle, as the flight attendants will be coming through the cabin with galley cards shortly. Also, one more reminder to please refrain from congregating with the front galley where the flight deck door is located. Thank you.
There's the company message. So from DC. Information Charlie 0352 190 at 4. Broken 25,000. 13 degrees centigrade, that's about 54 degrees Fahrenheit, 3010. And as we expect the river visual to 09. Oops. Advisory, runway 422 is closed. And reminder not to enter the prohibited airspace over Washington, D.C. there. I'll talk more about that a little bit later. so let's plug in the arrival info. So we're going to come to, and we're going to skip ahead to the approach phase. And the altimeter was 3010. Temperature was 13. And the wind was 190 at 4. Transition still 18,000 feet. It's got a barometer. Because we're going to do a visual, I'm not going to plug a decision altitude because we're going to be flying the river visually, so we'll just wait for the river to come into play. We're going to go config full for landing with a short runway. And with that being said, I'm going to actually set up auto brakes medium. So we'll have that pre-programmed. So now we're going to come back over to here, and we're just going to take a look at the river visual into DC. Well, first we'll look at the Clipper arrival. As you can see, Modena, Nuggy, that doesn't apply to non-turbojets, Troy's Belay, Trish, cross at 12, Clipper, Baltimore at 250, expect to cross at 10. Eyes, and then since we're south transition, Edwood, Megs, Nays, and then radar vectors. So then the actual approach, river visual to 19. Oops, I did that again. So we're gonna pick up the river visually somewhere here. I do have these waypoints mapped out in the box, but Fergie crossed at 3, and then we follow the river all the way down to DC. And then what I was mentioning here is over DC, because of the obvious nature of this security sensitive buildings in DC, airliners are not allowed, or nobody's allowed to fly for that matter, over the city of DC, so there's some prohibited airspace there. That's why we follow the river and turn right at the last minute runway 19 rather than do a straight in runway 19. So the threats on this approach are obviously going to be the prohibited airspace, and then the runway in DC is pretty short, it's only 6,800. And then one other thing to note in DC, and it's not listed on this chart, but sometimes runway 15 gets mistaken for runway 19 in DC, so we just got to be a little extra vigilant for that. Otherwise, it's a river visual. We'll back it up with the box. There's a PAPI on the left side of the airport that will give us vertical guidance as we get a little closer. And then I've got auto brakes medium set in the box. So we're going to plan a right turn off. And it's probably going to be a right turn off on Alpha. And since 422 is closed, we can just expect to taxi back to Juliet. And our parking spot is going to be right over here on this gate here. I mentioned it's a config full approach. And that's pretty much the approach briefing. So the approach briefing has been given. Now, based on the arrival, we can expect to cross Trish at 12. I'm just going to go ahead and plug it in the box now. And I'm also going to plug Baltimore at 10 into the box. And you can ignore that 22,000 in the box there. I'm using a freeware program for this called Fly-by-Wire, and they've done a really good job to this day of modeling a lot of what the real airplane can do, but there's still a lot of things that it can't do. Vertical nav is one of those things, unfortunately. That's why you don't see the hockey sticks on the nav data that some of you might be familiar with. So we just got to be a little extra vigilant, recognize that's the limit with the automation, and we'll fly it accordingly. For those of you questioning the Z time on the ATIS, that is the real world ATIS. I'm filming this at night in the real world. It's nighttime in the real world, but I reset the timer in the simulator to daylight so that you can enjoy these awesome views, and I'll show you some outside views in a second. I don't have any fancy liveries, unfortunately, for this program just yet, but that should come in due time. You can see here, look at this airplane here. Attention to detail. I mean, the scenery is just impeccable. So I had to show that off. And for those of you who were wondering why I didn't show the knob turn or the engine flips on the engine startup, it's because I actually am using the Thrustmaster Airbus throttles on this thing, which have built-in engine switches and ignition start, so I just flip a switch on my throttle quadrant, which is external to the tower, and it just works just like the real plane. And my thrust levers also have all the same detents, so I have toga, flex, MCT, I'm at climb detent now, and I do have full reverse capabilities. And I'm also flying this thing with an Airbus side stick, which you can't see. So I'm using both the Thrustmaster Airbus side stick and the Thrustmaster Airbus throttles, and it works really well. I've been very impressed with the product so far. So we're just 9 miles from Medina now, and we do want to cross Trish at 12. So I have a calculator built in since we don't have ATC. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to plug in 12,000 as a target altitude, my current altitude. It says to make 12,000, we start to descend about 31 miles before the target. Which is going to be somewhere between Modena and Nugget, because it's about 22, actually check that, it's about 22 nautical miles from Nugget to Trish, so probably about 10 this side of Nugget is what I'm going to actually plug in the 12,000. That way we can make our 12,000 crossing at Trish, and we're going to assume that that's what ATC gave us, is the 12,000 at Trish. And I'm not going to plug that in just yet, but I'll be vigilant to do so. As you can see on the nav display, it's got RNAV 19 in the box, because that's what we've got for the approach. And then down here in the box, we do have DCA runway 19. So I'm actually going to scroll this box all the way down to our current fix, which is direct Nuggies. Another thing the box they have not simulated yet is what goes in one box goes in the other box. On the real airplane, the two FMSs are independent, so you can do some things in one box without changing the other box. But on this airplane, as you can see, if I was to go, let's say, to the performance page on one, it goes to the performance page on the other. That's not how it works in the real world. I'm just going to zoom the nav display back in so I can get a better look. as you can see, we got a 30 nautical mile arc here. So I'm probably just going to go ahead and plug the 12,000 foot crossing in now for Trish. So 12,000 up here. We're just going to start down now. I'm just going to do this in descent rather than open descent. So we're starting our descent into Washington National right now.
From the flight deck, ladies and gentlemen, as you may have noticed, we have begun our initial descent down to our destination. Now would be a good time to wrap up any business you need to take care of as we prepare for approach. If you are up, once you return to your seat, we ask that you remain seated till your aircraft arrives safely at the gate. Flight attendants, please prepare the cabin for arrival.
One of the things fly-by-wire did, as you notice, they've got some of the announcements that sound real authentic looking, so that it feels like you're actually on the air. You're actually flying the airplane, and you actually probably heard the flight attendant safety briefing when we push back on LaGuardia. So since we're on our initial descent now, I'm just going to go ahead and seat the passengers down. I accidentally hit the engine tube bleed off, so I'm going to turn that back on. I'm going to brighten these displays up a little bit so you can see them better. I know they're a little difficult to see in the stream. Just get my mouse in the right place for the nav display. It's been finicky on me. Hopefully you can see that now. Now we're coming up on 18. So we're going to put our lights back on. And the local altimeter is 3010. So 3010 set in the primary and the standby, and we'll do a quick descent checklist. Altimeter is 3010 set. Auto brake medium is set. Performance approach briefing page is set. Arrival briefing is reviewed. It's the Clipper 2 arrival for the river visual to runway 19 DCA. And the status is checked. So our descent checklist is complete. Pull some speed brakes. We may not make this 12,000 foot crossing. Some speed brakes. 12. So, yeah, now we're definitely going to make 12. So, pull the speed brake back. And right about here, this is where we would be headed off in the real world to Potomac Approach. And Potomac Approach would give us something like cross Baltimore at 10. So we're just going to cruise at 12 for a bit, and then I'll pop 10 in a little bit later. I want to keep my speed up for as long as possible. And if I go down to 10, then I'll have to slow to 250 quicker. See here the northern part of the Chesapeake Bay. Look at the scenery, it's just amazing. And this airport down here, I believe, is Martin State Airport. I could be wrong on that. But it looks like, according to my nav display, that is the case. As you can see at our 12 o'clock right here, this is Baltimore Washington International Airport. The Baltimore VOR is located right on the airport. And I think I'm going to start down now, that way we can be at 10 at Baltimore. There's 11 for 10. Now, as you can see here, the airplane is starting to throttle back so that we can make 250 by 10. Which is why I wanted to descend into Baltimore a little early, because I wanted to allow for that to happen. Sufficiently at 250, and we're going to easily make the 10,000 at Baltimore. So, and then this is about where Potomac would hand us off to another Potomac controller. Potomac's divided into many areas, so there's a ton of controllers in Potomac. So I'm going to zoom this in a little bit more, because we're getting pretty close. And And I'm also going to switch my speed to selected speed until we're on final approach. And the reason I'm going to do that is because often ATC in this area will give you speed restrictions and stuff, and it's just easier to do it in selected than managed. Plus, when approach mode gets activated in the FMGC, the autopilot will slow you immediately down all the way to your final approach speed, and I don't really want to be slowed down to my final approach speed until I'm actually on final approach. So we're going to fly this in selected speed until we're on final approach. That being said, straight ahead, this area here is the National Mall. And somewhere over in this area is the Ronald Reagan Washington National Airport. And at this point, I'm going to tell the flight attendants to be seated. Those numbers look a little brighter. I know they don't look show up well on the stream, so yeah, right here. This is Washington National Airport. That's where we're going to be landing in just a few minutes. But we have to go around this DC in order to get there because of the prohibited airspace. So. So I'm going to actually start down to 6,000 since we're coming up here. I am going to open descent this time because I'm not worried about making any crossing restrictions. This is where we make our right turn onto the downwind leg for the river visual. You can see the Potomac River's in sight. I'm going to help this down a little bit. now. See, the scenery is absolutely gorgeous. And look at the river and look at the stuff. It's just breathtaking. I started down a little too high, so it's okay. We'll simulate a long final. They do this in the real world too, as any real world pilot can attest. There's 4 for 3. Up. At level of 3, we're going to slow down to 210 knots. And
2,500.
We're also going to turn left to 220 heading. And I'm going to call flaps 1. Right about here, this is where ATC would tell us to report the river in sight, and of course we do have the river in sight, it's right in front of us. So then they'll clear us to the river visual runway 19. I'm going to maintain 180 knots until closer in, so we're going to slow further to 180 knots. So now we're going to go flaps 2. Oops. So now we're just going to turn the airplane toward the river a little bit more. Absolutely gorgeous day here. So I think right now I'm just going to go Fergie. I'll actually plug direct Fergie in the box here. And then I'm going to activate approach phase. right here's the Potomac River, so we're just going to follow this all the way into Washington. Careful not to come over land closer in and violate the P-56, and the airport's right over here. And I'm actually going to kick the autopilot off now. And we're going to kick the flight director off. Now it's just following the river into the airport. Alright, gear down.
$2,500.
And we're going to start slowing to our final approach speed now. Flaps 3. Alright, so before landing checklist, altimeter's 3010 set twice, gear down 3 green, landing status no blue, and engine mode normal.
$1,000.
Stable target sync 700.
$500.
Stable target sync 800.
$400. $300. $200. $100. 50, 40, 30, 20, retard, 5.
Knots, 60 knots. Okay. right turn here. We'll taxi up Kilo to our gate. And I overshot the right turn by the right turn a little too late, but I corrected and actually got the landing done. So, wasn't my best landing, but all in all, it was a very smooth landing. So we'll start the APU. As you can see here, the scenery of this airport is amazing too. And look at the, I mean, they got the taxiway paintings and everything. It's just absolutely gorgeous. Park right next to this other American plane here. Right. Shut down, parking brake set. Seatbelt sign off. Parking brake is on and checked. Engine masters are off. And the game's gonna give me a stupid prompt here in a second. Mode norm, speed brake disarmed, radar off, predictive wind shear off, fuel pumps off. We'll switch to external power while we're at it. And we'll get them to hook up the jet bridge.
The afters are disarmed.
The doors are verified.
And doors are disarmed, and the cabin door is open. And I'm going to leave the APU on. Well, folks, thanks for flying with us. That was a fun little short flight from LaGuardia to DC. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you want to see more of this content, please like, comment, and subscribe. And until next time, happy flying. Bye now.